And I want to aim for the ridges, not the inside bits. This way it's soaking down into all the bits, running into it, filling it up from the sides, not pouring it directly into the holes. You want to overfill the mould because it's got water in it. The water's going to rise to the surface. There are some moulds that are harder to cast with, others that are easier. Now I'm pouring this a little faster than normal because I've just noticed my table's on a slant and I've got plaster dripping everywhere. I'll have to fix that in a minute. Overfill the mould. Plaster's going to run everywhere. Brilliant. That goes off. Now these get moved and I move them to the side. Now they'll sit there for a little while. I'll leave those ones for a couple of minutes. They're going to have to be left for a little while. Clean up my tools. So they're setting up. Now I'll go ahead, I've still got a little bit of plaster in here. I'll go ahead with this plaster here. You could, if you had another mould prepared, pour this plaster. I'm just going to pour it in the bin I've got down here. Now you want a couple of cups handy. I've only got one at the moment. I'm going to go rinse this cup and be back in a second. Normally I'd have lots of cups, so I can use one cup, put it to the side, let it dry. Use another cup, put that to the side, let it dry. Once they're all dry, you can squeeze the cup and all the plaster in the side will crack and you can clean it out. Now we can continue. Meanwhile, those moulds over there are setting up. Water's rising to the surface because the plaster is heavy, then the water so it sinks. And I'll end up with a layer of water on the top there, which is why I need those paper towels shortly to absorb that water. It'll make the scrape a lot cleaner. You know when that's ready to dump the piece of paper onto it because it will start to feel like toothpaste. Just prod the edge. If it's still wet, if it's still moving, you need to wait longer. Generally it takes about 5 to 7 minutes. Enough time for you to pour your second set of moulds. Now you could do this with as many moulds as you want. Sometimes I do 2 litres of plaster at a time when I'm casting 8 or 10 moulds at the same time. Because most of the Hirst projects will require multiple casts of the same mould, normally I'd sit down, especially when I was building commercially a few years back with Hirst stuff, I'd sit down and for 2 days straight, 12 hours a day, I'd do nothing but watch TV, movies and cast blocks for 2 days. And I'd cast all the moulds I had. Now I've got 35 of them. I'd cast them all. And then I'd do build for a couple of weeks. And then do that again. Now if you're doing this just for a side project or something like that, it's going to take some time, especially if you're casting one mould and then waiting for it to set up, waiting for it to dry, then popping your blocks. And it'll take practice to find a plaster that you enjoy using. At one stage I really enjoyed using dental plaster, but dental plaster doesn't keep as long as Hydrostone does. There we go. If you sieve your plaster like you would flour, run it through a sift, not sure what the word is, it will be a lot better. Yep, I'll cast with that, so. You don't want chunks and lumps of plaster falling in here. You want a nice, consistent powder. So those moulds over there, the two that we pulled before, they're still setting up. So I've got time here to either go and do whatever I need to do or start casting my second set. Again, you want to get this nice and mixed, thoroughly mixed. I'll get the camera over here in a minute once we've pulled these ones, and you'll be able to see the water starting to pool up on the surface of that. Hence the reason we need these paper towels here to get rid of that water before we scrape our moulds. This is not a clean process. I've got a plastic towel down, plastic sheet on the table. So when I'm finished and all the plaster's dried to the table, I can just wrap this all up, scrunch it into a ball, that'll break all the plastic off of the sheet, and then tip it into the bin. As you start to pour on here, this plaster on here is going to make the surface uneven. You want to get rid of that. Mate, you want to keep all your tools clean. You don't want dried plaster going everywhere. Chuck them in the bin. Set the spoon aside. Let our plaster sit for a little bit. And clean off this muck on here. And just take it straight off the side there. Because if that dries on there, it's going to make this surface uneven. So we just want to get rid of that, push it to the side. Now I'll go again. Give that a good spray. Let it sit there for a second. Now this has got lots of small holes in it, so you want to be real careful with this one, and you want to be real careful with the pores. This one here is the accessory molds. It's got the beer barrels and the chests and little sacks of flour and small buckets and broken buckets and fire pits and all that sort of stuff. This is an advanced mold. It takes a long time to get it working well. It's got thin bits in it as well, which break as you take it out, so there are tricks to using this mold. So, you know, we bang it out, pop it on our surface, bang this one out, pop it in our surface, vibrate, and pour. Now the bigger ones here you can pour directly into. But if they're smaller blocks, you want to pour from the edge. Overfill the mold. You want to be nice and close to the mold. You don't want to be high up. I just noticed one of the blocks there didn't pour properly. That's not going to come out correctly. You want it to drip in there from the sides, and oh man, there's massive chunks in this plaster, bloody hell. And let it rise up from the sides. That way it's going to carry air up with it instead of trapping it below. This is a tricky mold to cast, this one. I've already seen from the way I've poured this that I've stuffed up 3 of the blocks in here. Now they'll come out, but they're not going to be perfect. Now some people would call what I've done a waste of plaster, etc. But this is my style, my technique, because of the way that I cast with Hydrostone. It contains a lot of water. You need to get a lot of plaster on the top of this mold so that when the water rises to the surface, you've still got plaster in your mold, not empty space. So we'll leave those ones to set up for a little bit.